Hey, you're still awake. And something tells me it's not just because you aren't tired. You're exhausted. Maybe more than you've admitted to anyone lately. But here you are, lying in the dark, and your mind, it just won't stop. The thoughts keep coming. The worries keep circling. And the silence that was supposed to bring you rest has somehow become the loudest part of your entire day. So before this night goes any further, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really sit with it, just for a moment. When was the last time you felt truly at peace? Not distracted, not just busy enough to push everything aside, but genuinely, deeply at rest. The kind of rest where your chest actually feels lighter, where something inside you just exhales. Because for so many people lying awake right now, that kind of peace feels like something they used to know. Something that existed before life got this heavy, before the responsibilities piled this high, before the nights became louder than the days. And if that's where you are tonight, if something inside you is still running even though your body is completely still, then I want you to know you are exactly where you need to be right now. This story tonight is not for the version of you that has everything figured out. It is not for the version that appears strong in front of everyone else. This story is for the real you, the one lying here in the quiet and the dark, carrying more than anyone around you fully knows, still believing, even when faith feels thin, still praying, even when the answers feel far away, still holding on, even though holding on has quietly become one of the most exhausting things you do. Jesus sees that person. He has always seen that person. And tonight, in the stillness of this moment, He is not asking you to be stronger before He draws near. He is not waiting for you to have more answers, more faith, or more peace before He shows up. He is already here, right now, in this very room, closer than your own breath, gentler than the quiet surrounding you. And what He is offering you tonight is not a sermon. It is not a list of things you need to do better. What He is offering you, in this exact moment, with all of your weariness and all of your worries still wrapped around your heart, is rest. Real rest. The kind that goes past your body and settles somewhere deep in your soul, in places that sleep alone could never reach. Because the same Jesus who once said, "Come to me all who are weary, and I will give you rest." He is saying those exact same words to you tonight, with the same tenderness, the same gentleness, the same love that has never once changed. So stay with me tonight. Let your breathing slow, just a little. Let your shoulders soften. Let your hands unclench from everything you have been gripping so tightly. And let this be the night you finally stop carrying what was never meant to be yours alone. Let this be the night you stop fighting the quiet and instead let it hold you. Because you were never meant to carry all of this by yourself. And tonight, Jesus is right here, ready to take every single bit of it from you while you sleep. Maybe you don't even remember when it started. This feeling of carrying everything all at once. It didn't happen overnight. It crept in slowly, quietly, the way most heavy things do. First it was one worry, something small, something you told yourself you could handle. Then another concern attached itself to that one. Then another. And before you even realized what was happening, you were waking up with a weight on your chest that wasn't there a year ago, and falling asleep with thoughts that refused to settle no matter how tired your body felt. And somewhere along the way, without meaning to, without even choosing it consciously, you got used to carrying it. You got used to the heaviness. You got used to smiling when people expected you to smile, answering, "I'm fine," when someone asked how you were doing, and then coming home at the end of the day and quietly returning to the weight that never really left. Because that's what people like you do, isn't it? You carry, you manage, you hold things together for everyone around you, and you do it so consistently, so faithfully, that people forget to ask if you're okay, because you always seem okay. But tonight, in this quiet, in this stillness where no one else is watching and no one else needs anything from you right now, you don't have to be okay. You don't have to hold the shape of someone who has it all together. You can just be honest. Honest with yourself and honest with God, who already knows everything you haven't said out loud. He knows about the fear you carry for someone you love deeply, the one whose name comes to your mind before you even finish your first prayer of the day. He knows about the financial pressure that visits your thoughts at the worst possible moments. He knows about the health concern you've been trying not to think about too much. He knows about the relationship that still aches in a place no one else can see. He knows about the dream you've quietly stopped talking about because disappointment has taught you to protect yourself. He knows all of it, every single layer of it, and not one part of what you're carrying has surprised him. Not one worry has caught him off guard. Not one fear has made him step back from you. In fact, the very things that feel too complicated for you to untangle are the things he has already held in his hands with perfect understanding and perfect calm. And maybe that's the part that is hardest to believe on a night like tonight. That God is not overwhelmed by what overwhelms you. That the burden sitting on your chest right now, the one that feels so heavy and so real and so impossible to put down, it is not heavy in his hands. It has never been heavy in his hands. He holds it the way a father holds something precious, carefully, completely, without strain. And he has been waiting so gently and so patiently for you to let him take it. Not because you are weak for having carried it this long, but because you were never designed to carry it alone in the first place. And here is something beautiful that most tired hearts forget. God has never once looked at you in your weariness and felt disappointed. He has never seen you struggling under the weight of everything you carry and wished you were stronger. He has never watched you lying awake at night, mind racing, heart heavy, and thought less of you for it. In fact, if you look all the way through Scripture, you will find something that is almost surprising when you first notice it. Jesus was never harsh with exhausted people. He was never impatient with broken people. He never turned away the ones who came to him with nothing left. The people he drew closest to were often the ones the world had already decided were too far gone, too weak, too complicated, too much. And yet those were precisely the ones he sat with. Those were the ones he stayed for. Those were the ones he looked at with a tenderness so deep it changed them completely, not because they had earned it, but simply because his love has never required earning. And maybe tonight, that is the truth your heart needs more than anything else. Not another reminder of what you should be doing better. Not another gentle nudge toward more discipline or more consistency or more faith. But simply this: you are not too much for him. You have never been too much for him. The weariness you feel right now, the confusion, the quiet ache that follows you from one day into the next, none of that has pushed him away from you. If anything, it has drawn him closer, because that is simply who he is. He moves toward the weary. He leans in toward the broken. He stays near to the ones who feel like they are barely holding on. And right now, in this very moment, as you lie here with all of your questions and all of your tiredness and all of the things you haven't been able to say out loud to anyone, he is leaning in toward you. He is not standing at a distance, watching to see if you will pull yourself together. He is here, right beside you, the way a shepherd stays close to the sheep that has wandered far and come home exhausted. There is no lecture waiting for you. There is no list of conditions you must meet before His peace becomes available to you tonight. There is only grace. Quiet, steady, undeserved, and completely real grace that meets you exactly where you are. Not where you think you should be, not where you were last year, not where you hope to be someday, but right here, right now, in this moment, exactly as you are. And perhaps that is the most restful thought of all, that you do not have to become a different person before God's love reaches you fully. That the version of you lying here tonight, tired and honest and still, is already completely known, completely seen, and completely loved by the one whose love has no conditions and no end. There is something that happens in the quiet hours of the night that doesn't happen anywhere else. Something shifts when the world finally goes still around you. The noise that filled the day begins to fade. The demands that felt so urgent just a few hours ago slowly lose their grip. And in that gentle stillness, in that sacred space between waking and sleep, something inside the human heart begins to soften in a way it simply cannot during the busyness of the day. And maybe that is not an accident. Maybe God designed the night exactly this way, not as a time of emptiness, but as a time of nearness. A time when the distractions fall away and all that remains is you and Him. Because so much of life pulls us in 100 different directions at once. There are responsibilities calling for your attention from the moment you open your eyes in the morning. There are people who need things from you. There are problems waiting to be solved, decisions waiting to be made, and a world that rarely pauses long enough to ask how you are really doing beneath all of it. And so you keep moving. You keep giving. You keep showing up, day after day, pouring out from a place that doesn't always get the chance to be refilled. But the night is different. The night belongs to something quieter and something deeper. And perhaps right now, in this very moment, as the world outside grows still and the room around you holds its peaceful silence, God is doing something in you that could only happen here, not in the middle of the noise, not in the rush of the morning, not in the crowded hours of the afternoon, but here, in this gentle darkness, where your defenses are down and your heart is finally open enough to receive what it has needed all along. Think about that for just a moment. You spend so much of your life giving, doing, managing, holding, and those things are not wrong. They come from a place of love and responsibility and faithfulness. But even the most faithful heart needs a moment to stop giving and simply start receiving. And what God wants to give you tonight is not complicated. It is not something you have to work for or prepare yourself to accept. It is simply His presence, steady and warm and completely unhurried, settling over you the way a soft blanket settles over tired shoulders on a cold night. His presence that says, without words, you are safe here. You are known here. You are loved here, in this moment, exactly as you are. And maybe that is what the deepest part of you has been longing for through all the noise and all the busyness and all. The days that pass too quickly. Not more answers. Not more strength to keep carrying everything. But simply this. A moment of true stillness in the presence of the God who made you, who knows you, and who has never once stopped loving you through every season you have walked through to get to this very night. And perhaps one of the heaviest things you carry tonight is something that most people never talk about openly: the weight of worry about someone you love. Because there is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from your own struggles, but from watching someone you deeply care about walk through something painful and feeling completely helpless to fix it. Maybe it is a child whose choices have been breaking your heart lately. Maybe it is a spouse who is carrying something heavy of their own, and no matter how much you love them, You cannot seem to reach the part of them that is hurting. Maybe it is a parent whose health has been declining, and every phone call carries with it a quiet fear of what the news might be this time. Or maybe it is a friend, a sibling, someone whose name is so close to your heart that their pain feels almost like your own. And because you love them so deeply, you have taken their burden and added it to yours. You have lain awake turning their situation over and over in your mind, searching for something you could do, something you could say, some way you could make it better. You have prayed for them more times than you can count. You have worried for them in the spaces between your prayers. And somewhere in that cycle of loving and worrying and praying and worrying again, your own heart has grown quietly exhausted in a way that is very difficult to explain to anyone who hasn't felt it themselves. But here is the truth that your tired heart needs to hold on to tonight, gently but firmly. The people you love are not outside of God's reach. Not one of them. Not the one whose situation looks impossible right now. Not the one who has wandered far from where you prayed they would be. Not the one whose pain you would take onto yourself in a heartbeat, if only you could. Every single person you are lying here worrying about tonight is already fully known to God. He sees them with a clarity and a love that goes even deeper than yours, and yours is already profound. He knows every detail of what they are walking through. He knows what they need in ways that go far beyond what any human love, no matter how devoted, can fully provide. And He is already present with them, even in the places your arms cannot reach, even in the moments you are not there, even in the parts of their story that are still hidden from your eyes. And maybe that is the hardest thing to do, to love someone deeply and then release them into God's hands. Because releasing doesn't feel like love sometimes. It feels like letting go. It feels like giving up. But true surrender is not giving up on the people you love. It is trusting them to someone whose love for them is even greater than your own, whose wisdom is perfect, whose timing never fails, and whose hands are strong enough to hold what yours were never designed to carry alone. So tonight, as you lie here with their names quietly resting on your heart, you can whisper those names to God one more time. And then, gently, lovingly, and with as much trust as you can gather in this moment, you can leave them there with Him. Because He is watching over them tonight, just as faithfully as He is watching over you. And maybe, as you release those names into God's hands tonight, something else begins to surface quietly in your heart. The weight of everything that is uncertain about your own life. Because uncertainty has a way of following people into the night, doesn't it? During the day, you can stay busy enough to keep it at a distance. You can fill the hours with tasks and conversations and the ordinary rhythm of responsibilities. But when the night comes and the busyness fades and there is nothing left to distract you, uncertainty finds you again, and it whispers all the questions you haven't been able to answer. Questions about your future that still feel unclear. Questions about a decision you are facing that doesn't have an obvious right answer. Questions about whether you are on the right path, making the right choices, heading in the right direction. Questions about finances that keep you up more often than you would like to admit. Questions about your health, or the health of someone you love, that you try not to think about too deeply during the day because the fear attached to them feels too large to look at directly. And all of these questions, all of this uncertainty, carries a particular kind of weight that is different from ordinary tiredness. It is the weight of not knowing. And not knowing is one of the hardest places the human heart can live. Because we were made for connection and clarity and purpose and direction. We were made to belong somewhere, to move towards something, to feel the quiet confidence that comes from knowing where we stand. And when life becomes uncertain, when the path ahead feels hidden and the answers feel distant, and the future feels like something we cannot quite reach or understand, something deep inside us becomes unsettled in a way that no amount of sleep can fully fix on its own. But here is what God wants you to know tonight. In the middle of all of that uncertainty, in the middle of every unanswered question and every unclear path and every fear about what tomorrow might hold, He has never once been uncertain about you, not for a single moment, not in any season of your life. No matter how lost or confused or directionless you may have felt at the time, while everything around you shifted and changed and surprised you in ways you never expected, His knowledge of you never wavered. His plan for you never unraveled. His love for you never became confused or unclear or unsure. He has always known exactly where you are. He has always known exactly what you need. He has always known how your story connects to something larger and more beautiful than you are able to see from where you are standing right now. And perhaps that is the most stabilizing truth available to you on a night like tonight. Not that all of your questions will be answered by morning. Not that every uncertainty will suddenly resolve itself while you sleep. But that the God who holds your future is not uncertain about it. He is not nervously watching your life unfold and hoping things work out. He is not surprised by the complications or the detours or the chapters that didn't go according to your plan. He already knows the end of your story, and He has written it with love. And perhaps what makes uncertainty even heavier is the way it has a habit of pulling the mind backward into regret. Because for so many people, the unanswered questions about the future are not the only things keeping them awake tonight. There are also the memories, the moments from the past that still visit without invitation, especially in the quiet hours when there is nothing left to drown them out. Maybe there is a conversation you replayed 100 times, wishing the words had come out differently. Maybe there is a decision you made years ago that still leaves a quiet ache behind your eyes when you think about it too long. Maybe there is a relationship that ended in a way that still doesn't make complete sense, no matter how many times you have turned it over in your mind. Or maybe there is simply a version of yourself from an earlier chapter of your life that you look back on with a complicated mixture of love and regret, wishing you had known then what you know now, wishing you had chosen differently, wishing you had been braver or wiser or more present in moments that passed before you fully understood their value. And the cruel thing about regret is that it offers no resolution. It only offers reruns. It takes you back to the same moment again and again, lets you feel the weight of it again and again, and then reminds you, again and again, that you cannot change it. And so the heart stays stuck, one foot in the present and one foot in a past that no longer exists, carrying a burden that has no practical purpose and yet feels impossible to simply set down. But dear friend, God has never asked you to carry your past into tonight. He has never designed regret as a permanent residence for your heart. He has never looked at the chapters of your life that you are most ashamed of and said, yes, hold on to those. Let those define you. Let those be the lens through which you see yourself forever. That has never been His heart toward you. Because the same God who knows every mistake you have ever made, every moment you wish you could rewrite, every chapter that unfolded in ways that still bring you pain, that same God looked at all of it and still chose you, still loves you, still calls you His own, and not reluctantly, not with reservation, not with a kind of distant tolerance that keeps you at arm's length until you have sufficiently punished yourself for the things you regret, but fully, warmly, with a love that reached into your most broken places and decided that you were worth every bit of grace it would take to restore you. And maybe tonight, the most healing thing you can do is not to revisit the past one more time, but to release it, not to pretend it didn't happen, not to minimize the pain attached to it, but to place it honestly and completely into the hands of a God whose mercy is genuinely new every single morning. Because his forgiveness was never meant to be something you visit once and then carry guilt about for the rest of your life. It was meant to be something you return to as often as you need it. Something that remains as fresh and as real and as available to you tonight as it was the very first time you received it. You are not too far gone. You have never been too far gone. And the past that haunts you has already been held in hands far more capable of redeeming it than your own. And as you begin to release the past into God's hands tonight, something else quietly rises to the surface. Something that is perhaps even more difficult to talk about than regret, because it lives in a place so private that most people have never spoken it out loud to another human being. It is the feeling of being deeply, profoundly tired of trying. Not tired of life, not tired of faith, but tired of the effort it takes to keep believing when the answers are slow. Tired of the discipline it requires to keep praying when heaven feels quiet. Tired of the strength it demands to keep trusting when the things you have been trusting God for have not yet arrived. Because there is a particular kind of weariness that belongs only to people who have been faithful for a long time. People who have not given up. People who have kept showing up to their faith even on the days when it cost them something. People who have continued to believe even when believing felt more like a quiet, stubborn choice than a warm and certain feeling. And if that is where you are tonight, if your faith feels less like a roaring fire right now and more like a small, steady flame that you are protecting with everything you have left, I want you to know something important. That small flame is not a sign of weakness. That quiet, stubborn, tired kind of belief is not something God looks at with disappointment. In fact, it may be one of the most honest and courageous expressions of faith there is. Because it is easy to believe when everything is going well. It is easy to trust when the answers are coming quickly and the blessings are visible and the path ahead is clear. But to keep believing in the silence, to keep praying through the waiting, to keep holding on when holding on feels like the hardest thing you have ever done, that is a faith that has been tested and refined in ways that comfortable seasons could never produce. And God sees that in you. He sees the prayers you have whispered through tears when no one else was watching. He sees the mornings you chose to trust Him even though nothing in your circumstances gave you an obvious reason to. He sees the nights like this one, when you came back to Him again even though part of you wondered whether it was making any difference at all. And none of that has been invisible to Him. None of that has been wasted. Because here is a truth that tired believers need to hear more often than they do. God has never once measured the quality of your faith by how certain it felt in a moment. He has never looked at a trembling, exhausted, barely holding on kind of trust and found it insufficient. Some of the greatest expressions of faith recorded in Scripture came from people who were desperate, confused, and completely out of their own strength. People who had nothing left to offer except their honest need and their stubborn refusal to stop reaching for Him. And in those moments, without exception, He met them. He did not wait for them to become stronger before He showed up. He showed up precisely because they had finally stopped pretending to be strong enough on their own. And perhaps tonight, in your own quiet and honest exhaustion, He is meeting you in exactly the same way. And maybe, as that truth begins to settle gently over your heart tonight, Your breathing is already becoming a little slower than it was when you first lay down. Maybe the thoughts that felt so loud and so urgent just a little while ago are beginning to soften around the edges, just slightly, just enough for something quieter to come through. And that quietness, that is not emptiness. That is not the absence of something good. That is actually the presence of something real beginning to make itself known in the spaces between your thoughts. Because peace does not always arrive dramatically. It does not always come with a sudden feeling of certainty or a rush of emotion that sweeps everything difficult aside in an instant. More often than not, peace arrives the way the morning does, slowly, gently, almost without you noticing, until you look up and realize that something has shifted. The darkness is still there, but there is something moving through it. And maybe that is exactly what is happening in you right now. Something is moving through the heaviness you carried into this night. Something quiet and steady and completely unhurried is making its way into the tired places of your heart. Not because you have done everything right tonight, not because you have finally found the perfect words to pray, not because you have managed to release every single burden completely, but simply because God is faithful. And His faithfulness does not wait for perfect conditions before it shows up. It arrives in the middle of the mess. It arrives in the middle of the unanswered questions and the unresolved fears and the prayers that still feel like they are waiting for a response. It arrives in rooms like the one you are lying in right now, quiet and dark and full of a tiredness that goes deeper than sleep can reach on its own. And it says, without words, but with a certainty that goes deeper than words ever could, I am here. I have always been here. And I am not going anywhere. Think about what that means for you personally tonight. Not in a general, abstract, theological sense, but for you, specifically, lying here right now with your particular worries and your particular fears and your particular set of unanswered prayers. God is here for that. He is here for the specific weight you carried into this room tonight. He is not offering you a general kind of comfort that applies vaguely to everyone. He is offering you something personal and precise and completely tailored to the exact shape of what your heart is carrying. Because He knows the exact shape of it. He formed you. He has walked every step of your life with you. He knows which particular fear wakes you up at 3 in the morning. He knows which particular hope you have almost stopped praying about. He knows which particular memory still surfaces without warning and takes your breath away. And He is here, tonight, for all of it. Every specific, complicated, deeply personal piece of it. Not to fix it all in an instant, necessarily, but to be with you inside of it. To hold you steady within it. To remind you that nothing you are facing tonight is bigger than His presence. And nothing you are carrying tonight is heavier than His grace. And perhaps one of the most comforting things you can hold on to tonight, as your body grows heavier and your thoughts begin to slow, is the simple but profound truth that God has never once been late. Not in your life. Not in anyone's life. Not in a single chapter of human history where His children cried out to Him in the middle of their darkest nights. He has never arrived too late to matter. He has never shown up after the moment had already passed beyond redemption. He has never looked at a situation and decided it was too far gone for His grace to reach. And even in the seasons of your own life, when it felt like He was taking too long, even in the moments when the waiting stretched so far beyond what felt bearable that you began to wonder if He had forgotten the specific prayer you had placed before Him. He was not late. He was working, quietly, steadily, in ways that your eyes could not yet see and your understanding could not yet follow. He was already moving in the direction of your need. Because that is one of the most important things to understand about the way God works in human lives. He rarely operates on the timeline we would choose for ourselves. And that gap between our timeline and His is often where the deepest struggles of faith are born. We pray and we expect. We trust and we wait. And the waiting itself becomes a kind of test that nobody signs up for willingly, but that almost every faithful person walks through at some point in their journey. Maybe you are in that waiting right now. Maybe there is a prayer that has been on your lips for months, or even years, that still has not received the answer you have been hoping for. Maybe there is a situation in your life that you have brought to God so many times that you have almost lost count, and yet the circumstances still look the same as they did when you first began praying. And maybe, in your most honest moments, you have wondered whether something is wrong, whether you are missing something, whether God is trying to tell you something through the silence that you have not yet been able to understand. But dear friend, silence has never meant absence, and delay has never meant denial. Some of the most beautiful things God has ever done in human lives were preceded by seasons of waiting that felt, from the inside, like nothing was happening at all. And yet beneath the surface, in ways that no human eye could observe, roots were growing deeper. Character was being shaped. Trust was being built in places that comfort alone could never have reached. And perhaps the same is true for you right now. Perhaps what feels like waiting is actually preparation. Perhaps what feels like silence is actually God working in dimensions of your situation that exist beyond what you can currently see or measure or understand. And perhaps the very fact that you are still here, still praying, still believing, still trusting even through the exhaustion of a long wait, is itself evidence of a faith that has been quietly growing stronger through every season you thought it was barely surviving. So tonight, as you rest, you can release the pressure of needing the answer to arrive before morning. You can let go of the timeline you have been holding so tightly in your hands. And you can trust that the God who has never once been late in all of human history is not about to start being late with you. And as you release that timeline into God's hands tonight, something beautiful begins to happen in the quiet spaces of your heart. Because when we stop gripping so tightly to the way we think things should unfold, when we loosen our hold on the outcomes we have been trying so desperately to control, there is a kind of spaciousness that opens up inside us. A breathing room that wasn't there before. A gentleness that slowly begins to replace the tension that has been living in your chest for longer than you probably realize. And maybe you haven't noticed how much energy you have been spending simply on the effort of holding everything together in your mind. The constant mental checking, the endless rehearsing of scenarios, the quiet background hum of anxiety that follows you from one part of the day into the next, reminding you of everything that still needs to be resolved, everything that still feels uncertain, everything that hasn't yet fallen into place the way you need it to. That kind of mental effort is exhausting in a way that is very difficult to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it, because it doesn't look like work from the outside. You can be sitting completely still, perfectly quiet, and yet inside your mind there is an entire operation running at full capacity, managing fears, anticipating problems, preparing responses to situations that haven't even happened yet. And it drains you, slowly, consistently, in ways that accumulate over time until you arrive at nights like this one, lying down physically but unable to truly rest because the inner machinery hasn't received permission to stop. But tonight, right now, in this moment, you have permission to stop. Not to stop caring about the things that matter to you. Not to stop loving the people who depend on you. Not to stop being the responsible, faithful, devoted person that you genuinely are, but to stop carrying the full weight of all of it through every single moment of every single day without relief. Because God never designed the human heart to run without rest. He never designed your mind to be constantly managing the weight of an uncertain future without ever being allowed to lay it down. Even in the very beginning, before hardship ever entered the picture, before worry or fear or disappointment ever became part of the human experience, rest was already written into the design. It was not an afterthought. It was not a reward for people who had finally finished everything on their list. It was a gift built into the very rhythm of creation itself, because God understood from the very beginning that the soul needs stillness in order to remain whole. And perhaps tonight is your invitation back to that stillness. Not a forced stillness where you are trying to silence every thought through sheer willpower, but a received stillness, a surrendered stillness, the kind that comes when you finally believe, deeply enough to act on it, that the things you are releasing into God's hands tonight will still be there tomorrow, held perfectly and faithfully by someone who never grows tired, never loses track, and never needs to sleep in order to keep watch over the things that matter most to you. So let your mind begin to slow now. Let the inner machinery begin to quiet, gently and gradually, the way a river slows as it moves from rushing rapids into calm, open water. You don't have to force it. You don't have to make it happen. You simply have to stop resisting the rest that God has already prepared for you in this moment. And perhaps as your mind begins to slow and that gentle stillness starts to settle over you like something warm and familiar, you begin to notice something you may have overlooked. In the busyness of recent days, you begin to notice that God has actually been leaving traces of His faithfulness scattered quietly throughout your life all along. Little moments that were easy to miss in the rush of everything else. Small mercies that passed by without much acknowledgement because there was always something else demanding your attention. Quiet provisions that arrived so naturally, so smoothly, that they almost didn't register as the gifts they truly were. But lying here tonight, in the stillness, with nothing else pulling at you for just this moment, maybe you can begin to see them a little more clearly. The morning you woke up convinced that a situation was beyond repair, and then somehow, by the end of the day, something shifted in a way you hadn't anticipated. The conversation you were dreading that turned out to carry an unexpected grace in it. The moment when you were running on nothing, completely empty, and yet you found just enough strength to make it through the day anyway, though you still cannot fully explain where that strength came from. The time when a door closed that you desperately wanted to remain open, and the grief of it was real, and the disappointment was genuine. But looking back now you can see, even if only partially, that something better was already being prepared in the space that closing created. These moments exist in your story, maybe not as many as you would have chosen, maybe not arranged in the order you would have preferred, maybe wrapped in more difficulty and more waiting than felt fair at the time. But they are there, quiet fingerprints of a God who has been more present in your life than your most anxious moments have allowed you to believe. And maybe tonight, as you lie here resting, you can allow your heart to revisit some of those moments. Not to minimize the hard things, not to pretend that the painful chapters didn't hurt as much as they did, but simply to remember that you have a history with God, a real, personal, specific history filled with moments where He came through for you in ways that only He could have arranged. And that history matters tonight. Because the God who was faithful in those moments is the exact same God who is present with you in this one. He has not changed between then and now. His love has not diminished. His attention has not wandered. His commitment to you has not weakened simply because the current season feels harder or longer or more uncertain than you expected it to be. If anything, your history with him is one of the most powerful arguments available to you against the fear that tries to convince you he has forgotten you now. Because he did not bring you through everything you have already survived just to abandon you at this particular chapter. That is not who he is. That has never been who he is. And the evidence of his faithfulness, written quietly across the pages of your own life, is still there tonight, still true, still speaking, still reminding you that the God who carried you then is absolutely carrying you now. And as those quiet memories of his faithfulness begin to settle gently over your heart tonight, maybe something else begins to soften as well. Something that has been holding itself rigid for a long time without you fully realizing it. Because one of the things that prolonged weariness does to a person, one of the quieter effects that accumulates slowly over months and sometimes years of carrying too much, is that it causes the heart to begin protecting itself in ways that feel like strength but are actually a kind of armor. You stop expecting things to get better because expecting and then being disappointed has become more painful than simply not hoping in the first place. You stop talking about certain dreams because somewhere along the way you learned that speaking them out loud made the silence around them feel louder when they didn't come true on your timeline. You stop asking God for certain things, not because you stopped believing he could do them, but because a quiet part of you started wondering whether he would. For you, in your particular situation, in this particular season. And that is such a lonely place to live. Not a place of unbelief exactly, but a place of guarded faith. A faith that still shows up but keeps its heart behind a wall, just far enough back to avoid being fully hurt again if the answer turns out to be no one more time. And maybe you recognize that place tonight. Maybe you can feel that wall somewhere inside your chest. That careful distance you have learned to keep between your deepest hopes and your willingness to fully trust again. And if that is true, I want you to know something with as much gentleness as these words can carry. God is not offended by that wall. He is not standing on the other side of it with frustration or disappointment, waiting for you to tear it down before he will come close again. He understands exactly how it got there. He was present for every disappointment that contributed to its construction. He saw every unanswered prayer that added another brick. He witnessed every moment of hoping and waiting and hurting that made guarded faith feel like the only reasonable option left. And he has never once loved you less for it. But here is what he also knows, and what he longs for you to remember tonight in the quiet of this moment. That wall, as understandable as it is, as reasonable as it feels, is also keeping out the very comfort that your heart is most desperately hungry for. Because you cannot fully receive the peace he is offering tonight while simultaneously holding yourself at a careful distance from the one who is offering it. And he is not asking you to pretend the wall was never necessary. He is not asking you to act as though the disappointments that built it were not real or painful or significant. He is simply, gently, with more patience than you have probably extended to yourself in a very long time, asking you to let him in a little further tonight. Not all the way, if that feels like too much. Not with some dramatic act of complete surrender that your tired heart doesn't have the energy for right now. But just a little further. Just enough to let the warmth of his presence reach the parts of you that have been cold and guarded for too long. Because healing rarely happens all at once. It happens in small, quiet moments of permission, just like this one, where tired heart decides, one more time, to trust just a little more than it did yesterday. And maybe, as you allow that wall to soften just a little tonight, as you give yourself permission to trust just a fraction more than felt possible when this day first began, something unexpected starts to happen. The heaviness that has been sitting on your chest, the kind that has become so familiar you almost stopped noticing it was there, begins to feel just slightly different. Not gone necessarily, not completely lifted in a single moment, but different. Lighter in a way that is subtle but real. The way the air feels different just before dawn, even though the darkness is still fully present. And that difference, that barely perceptible shift, is not nothing. It is actually everything. Because it means that something is moving. Something is changing, not in your circumstances perhaps, not yet, but in the place that matters most tonight, which is inside you. In the quiet interior of a heart that has been carrying so much for so long that it forgot what it felt like to be carried itself. And maybe that is the invitation that has been waiting for you at the center of this entire night. Not an invitation to have more answers. Not an invitation to feel more certain about the future. Not even an invitation to feel more spiritually confident than you honestly do right now. But simply an invitation to be carried. To stop being the one who holds everything together for just these quiet hours, and to let yourself be held instead. Because there is a version of strength that our culture celebrates loudly and constantly. The kind that never shows weakness. The kind that keeps moving no matter what. The kind that handles everything independently and asks for help from no one. And while there is a place for perseverance and resilience and the kind of grit that gets you through difficult seasons, there is something that kind of strength can never give you. It cannot give you rest. It cannot give you the particular peace that comes from releasing control to someone wiser and stronger and more capable than yourself. And the beautiful paradox at the heart of the Christian faith is that the greatest strength available to you is not found in holding on more tightly. It is found in letting go more completely. It is found in the moment when you finally stop trying to be strong enough to handle everything and you simply fall into the arms of the one who is. And perhaps tonight is one of those moments for you. Not a dramatic falling, not a loud surrender, but a quiet, gentle, deeply personal decision made in the stillness of this room, in the honest privacy of your own heart, to stop striving and start resting, to stop managing and start trusting, to stop carrying and start being carried. Because the arms that are holding you tonight are not tired. They do not grow weary from the weight of what you bring to them. They do not shift or strain or need a moment to recover from the burden of your worry and your fear and your unanswered questions. They are the same arms that hold the entire universe in place, and yet they are tender enough to cradle one tired, honest, beloved heart on a quiet night exactly like this one. And that is where you are right now, held. Completely and securely and lovingly held. Not because you earned it, not because you finally got everything right, but simply because you are his. And he has never once let go of what belongs to him. And as you rest in that truth tonight, as the awareness of being held begins to replace the exhaustion of always being the one who holds, maybe your body is already responding to something your heart is slowly beginning to receive. Maybe your shoulders have dropped just a little from where they were carrying themselves an hour ago. Maybe your jaw has unclenched somewhere along the way without you even noticing it happen. Maybe your hands, which spend so much of the day gripping and managing and reaching for the next thing that needs to be handled, have finally gone soft and open against the sheets beneath you. And that softness, that quiet physical release, is not just tiredness taking over. It is something deeper than tiredness. It is your body beginning to agree with what your soul is slowly learning tonight. That it is safe to let go here. That nothing terrible will happen in the moment you stop bracing. That the world will not fall apart in the space between your last conscious thought and the first breath of morning. And maybe that sounds simple. Maybe it even sounds obvious when it is laid out that plainly. But for someone who has spent weeks or months or even years in a quiet state of inner tension, the idea that it is genuinely safe to stop bracing is not simple at all. It is actually one of the most radical things a tired heart can believe. Because tension has a way of convincing you that it is necessary. That if you relax your grip even slightly, something important will slip through. That the vigilance you maintain, the constant low-level monitoring of everything that could go wrong, is the only thing standing between your life and chaos. And so you keep holding, you keep watching, you keep carrying the invisible weight of a responsibility that was never entirely yours to carry in the first place. But tonight, in this quiet room, with the darkness gentle around you and the stillness holding everything in a kind of sacred pause, you can begin to release that illusion. Because the safety you have been trying to create through your own vigilance has always been more fragile than the safety God provides through His. Your watchfulness has limits. Your strength has a capacity that can be reached and exceeded. Your ability to anticipate and manage and control the things that concern you runs dry eventually, usually right around the time you find yourself lying awake in the dark wondering why peace feels so far away. But His watchfulness has no limits. His strength has no ceiling. His ability to manage what concerns you does not diminish at the end of a long day or grow thin after a season of sustained pressure. He is as fully present and as fully capable at 3 in the morning as He is at any other moment of the day or night. And nothing about your life requires less of His attention while you sleep. In fact, there is something beautiful in the thought that while you are resting, He is still fully engaged with everything. That concerns you. The prayers you whispered before closing your eyes tonight did not dissolve into the air when your awareness began to fade. They are being held. The people you love and worried about and placed into His hands are being watched over with a care so complete and so attentive that it would take your breath away if you could see it fully. And you, lying here right now in this quiet and honest and beautifully human moment of exhaustion and trust, are being held with that same completeness. So let your body be soft tonight. Let your mind be still. Let the gentle darkness around you be not a place of fear, but a place of rest. A sacred space where a faithful God keeps watch so that His beloved child can finally, fully, peacefully sleep. And as that peaceful darkness wraps itself gently around you tonight, as your body grows heavier and your thoughts grow softer, and the quiet of this room begins to feel less like emptiness and more like the tender presence of something holy, maybe this is the moment where you begin to truly understand something that has taken a long time to find its way from your head down into the deepest part of your heart. That rest is not something you have to earn. That peace is not something you have to manufacture. That the stillness available to you in this moment is not contingent on everything in your life being resolved or understood or perfectly arranged. It is simply here, offered freely, extended without condition. A gift from a God whose generosity does not operate the way the world's generosity does, requiring something in return before it gives, measuring what you deserve before it extends grace. No, His gifts arrive before you are ready for them. They show up in the middle of the mess rather than waiting for the mess to be cleaned up first. They reach you in your most honest and unpolished moments and say, "Here, this is for you." Not because you have done everything right, but because I love you and because you need it and because that has always been enough of a reason for me. And maybe tonight, that is the version of God you most need to encounter. Not the version that exists in moments of spiritual clarity and confident faith and answered prayer, but the version that shows up in the dark. The version that meets you when your faith is small and your questions are large and your energy for anything resembling spiritual performance has completely run out. The version that doesn't require you to have the right words or the right posture or the right level of theological understanding before he will sit with you in the quiet and simply be near. Because that version of God is not a lesser version. That is not God lowering his standards to accommodate your weakness. That is God being most fully and most beautifully himself. Because his nature has always been to draw near to the humble. His character has always inclined toward the broken. His heart has always moved in the direction of the ones who have nothing left to offer except their honest need and their weary presence. And your honest need and your weary presence are exactly what you have brought to this moment tonight. And they are enough. They have always been enough. Because you were never required to bring more than that. The performance was never what he was after. The polished version of you was never what he loved most deeply. What he has always wanted, from the very beginning of your story and through every chapter since, is simply you. The real you, the tired you, the hopeful and hurting and still believing you that is lying here right now in the quiet of this night, not entirely sure of everything, but sure enough of him to stay. And that is everything. That quiet, stubborn, beautiful decision to stay near to him even on the nights when nearness feels more like a choice than a feeling. That is the heart he has always been most drawn to. So stay near to him tonight. Let his presence be enough. Let his love cover what your strength cannot. And let this moment, simple and quiet and completely unhurried, be exactly what it is. A child resting in the presence of a father who has never once stopped loving them. Not for a single breath, not for a single heartbeat, not for a single quiet moment of an ordinary and extraordinary night like this one. And perhaps as you rest in that nearness tonight, as the warmth of his presence settles over you like something you didn't know you had been missing until it arrived, your mind begins to travel, gently and without effort, to some of the people who have shaped the story of your faith along the way. The ones who first showed you what it looked like to trust God through difficulty. Maybe it was a grandmother whose faith was so quiet and so steady that it felt less like a religious practice and more like the air she breathed. Maybe it was a parent who knelt beside their bed every night without fail, not because life had given them every reason to believe, but because something in them had decided long ago that God was worth returning to regardless of what the day had held. Maybe it was a friend who walked through something that should have destroyed their faith entirely, and somehow came out the other side not bitter, but softer, not hardened, but more open, not distant from God, but inexplicably closer to him than they had ever been before. And maybe watching those people, living alongside them, witnessing the particular quality of peace that their faith produced in them even in hard seasons. Maybe that planted something in you that has never fully left. A seed of belief that has survived your own difficult seasons, your own unanswered questions, your own nights of lying awake wondering whether any of it was real. Because faith has a way of being passed down not primarily through words, but through witness. Not primarily through sermons, but through the quiet, daily, ordinary faithfulness of people who chose to keep trusting when they had every reason not to. And you have seen that faithfulness up close in someone. You have watched it live in a person you loved or admired or simply observed from a respectful distance. And something in you recognized it as real. Something in you leaned toward it the way a plant leans toward light, not because you were told to, but because something deep inside you knew instinctively that what you were seeing was true. And that recognition, that quiet leaning toward the light of someone else's faith, became part of the foundation of your own. And tonight, as you lie here in the stillness, you are part of that same unbroken line of people who have decided, in their own tired and honest and deeply human way, to keep trusting, to keep returning, to keep showing up to a faith that does not always feel certain, but that has proven itself faithful in enough moments to make the continuing worth it. And maybe somewhere out there, someone is watching your faith the way you once watched someone else's. Maybe someone in your life has no idea that the quiet, stubborn way you keep believing through your own difficult seasons is planting something in them that will sustain them through seasons of their own that haven't even arrived yet. Because faithfulness is always doing more than we can see in the moment. It is always reaching further than our immediate circumstances. It is always contributing to a story that is larger than the chapter we are currently living through. And your faithfulness, even tonight, even in this exhausted and quiet and barely holding on kind of way, is part of something beautiful and significant and deeply, eternally real. And as that thought settles quietly over you tonight, as the awareness of being part of something larger and more beautiful than your current struggle begins to soften the edges of everything that has felt so heavy and so isolated lately. Maybe your breathing has slowed enough now that you can feel it. The rise and fall of your chest. The gentle rhythm that has been sustaining you through every difficult season of your life without ever once asking for your help or your management or your conscious effort to keep it going. And isn't that remarkable when you think about it? That right now, in this very moment, while your mind has been occupied with worries and your heart has been carrying burdens and your soul has been working through everything this season has brought, your body has simply been doing what it was designed to do. Breathing, resting, restoring itself in ways that happen completely beyond your awareness and completely outside of your control. And the same God who designed that breathtaking complexity, who wove together every system and every rhythm that keeps you alive without requiring your constant supervision, is the same God who is watching over every other detail of your life with that same attentiveness and that same perfect care. Think about what that means. The God who keeps your heart beating while you sleep is the same God who holds your future while you rest. The God who designed your body to heal itself in the quiet hours of the night is the same God who is working on the situations in your life that still feel broken and unresolved. The God who built rest into the very biology of your being did not do so because rest was a concession to human weakness. He did it because he knew, from the moment he formed you, that you would need spaces of stillness in order to receive what busyness and striving could never produce. And perhaps that is the most grounding thought available to you right now. As your body grows heavier and your mind grows quieter, and the gentle darkness of this room becomes less something to endure and more something to receive. That everything about how you were made points toward this moment, toward rest, toward release, toward the quiet surrender of a soul that has finally decided, at least for tonight, to stop managing what was never entirely theirs to manage, and to trust the one who was always meant to carry the greater weight of it. Because you were not designed to run indefinitely without stopping. You were not built for endless output without renewal. You were not meant to give and give and give from a place that never gets replenished. And sleep is not a weakness in your design. It is one of the most profound expressions of trust built into the very fabric of your humanity. Every time you close your eyes and allow yourself to drift into rest, you are, whether you realize it or not, making a statement of faith. You are saying, with your body, if not always with your words, that you believe the world will continue to be held together while you are not watching it. That you believe the people you love will still be cared for while your conscious mind is not monitoring their safety. That you believe tomorrow will arrive with enough grace to meet it, even though you are not spending tonight preparing for every possible version of it. And perhaps tonight, that statement of faith can go just a little deeper than it usually does. Perhaps tonight, the rest you enter can be not just physical but spiritual. Not just the closing of tired eyes, but the genuine releasing of a tired heart into the hands of the God who has always been more than capable of holding everything you are finally, gratefully, peacefully letting go. And as you drift a little deeper into that peaceful releasing tonight, as the boundary between waking and sleeping begins to grow beautifully thin, and everything that felt so urgent just a little while ago continues to soften and recede into the background of this quiet and holy moment. Maybe there is one more thing your heart needs to hear before sleep carries you completely away. Something simple. Something that doesn't require any effort from you to receive. Something that has been true about you since before you drew your first breath, and will remain true about you long after this night has given way to morning. You are loved, not in the general, surface-level way that word gets used so casually in the world around you. Not in the conditional way that human love, even at its very best and most devoted, sometimes operates. But in the specific, unhurried, completely personal way that only God loves. The way that knew your name before anyone else did. The way that understood every complicated layer of who you are before you understood it yourself. The way that has followed you through every version of yourself you have been across every season of your life. The confident versions and the broken versions. The faithful versions and the wandering versions. The versions you are proud of and the versions you would rather forget entirely. And has loved every single one of them with the same unwavering, undiminished, completely inexhaustible love. And maybe that is difficult to fully receive tonight. Maybe love on that scale feels almost too large to hold in a heart that is this tired. Maybe part of you wants to qualify it somehow, to add a condition or a caveat that makes it feel more proportionate to what you believe you deserve in this particular season. But God's love has never been proportionate to what we deserve. That is precisely what makes it grace. It exceeds what we could earn. It reaches beyond what we could merit. It arrives before we have done anything to justify it, and remains long after we have done things that should have, by any reasonable human standard, diminished it. And tonight, in this quiet room, in this honest and unguarded moment, that love is present. Not waiting for you to clean yourself up before it gets close. Not standing at a careful distance until you have demonstrated sufficient worthiness. But here, right now, as near as the air you are breathing, as gentle as the darkness surrounding you, as steady as the heartbeat sustaining you through this and every other night of your life. And perhaps, as your eyes grow heavy and your thoughts grow soft, and the beautiful pull of sleep becomes something you no longer feel the need to resist, You can simply rest in that love, not analyze it, not question it, not try to figure out how to be more deserving of it before morning comes. Just rest in it, the way a child rests in the arms of a parent who is completely trustworthy. The way someone rests when they have finally arrived somewhere safe after a long and exhausting journey. The way a soul rests when it has finally remembered, after too many days of forgetting, that it was never meant to carry the weight of the world alone. Because you were not. And tonight, you don't have to. Tonight, the weight belongs to him. Tonight, the watching belongs to him. Tonight, the holding belongs to him. And all that belongs to you, in this sacred and quiet and deeply restful moment, is the simple, beautiful, completely sufficient gift of being loved by a God who never sleeps, so that you finally, peacefully, completely can. And as that love settles over you like the softest and most familiar thing you have ever felt, as your body sinks a little deeper into the quiet comfort of this moment, and your thoughts become slower and gentler and further apart from one another, like stars spreading across a vast and peaceful sky. Maybe you are beginning to experience something that words can only gesture toward from a distance. That particular quality of stillness that exists at the place where complete exhaustion finally meets complete surrender, where the striving stops not because you have given up, but because you have given over, where the holding releases not because you no longer care, but because you have finally trusted someone else enough to care on your behalf. And there is a sweetness to that place that is unlike anything the busy hours of the day can produce. It cannot be rushed into. It cannot be manufactured through effort or discipline or the right combination of spiritual practices. It can only be arrived at, slowly and honestly, through the kind of journey you have been making tonight, through the gradual releasing of burdens, one by one, into hands more capable than your own, through the slow softening of a heart that has been braced for too long against too much, through the quiet decision, made not once but many times over the course of this evening, to trust just a little more, to release just a little further, to believe just a little deeper than felt completely comfortable at first. And here you are, having made that journey, having arrived at this place of quiet and rest, and something that feels remarkably, unexpectedly like peace. Not a perfect peace that exists because everything in your life has been resolved, but a real peace, a present peace, the kind that the Apostle Paul wrote about from a prison cell, of all places, describing it as something that surpasses understanding. And maybe tonight you understand a little better what he meant, because the peace you are feeling right now, if you are feeling it, does not make complete logical sense given everything that is still unresolved in your life. It is not the peace of a person whose problems have disappeared. It is the peace of a person who has placed their problems into God's hands and chosen, for this night at least, to leave them there. And that is a different and deeper and far more durable kind of peace than anything circumstances alone could ever produce. Because circumstances change, problems shift, seasons turn, but the peace that comes from genuinely trusting God does not depend on any of those external things remaining favorable. It rests on something far more stable than circumstances. It rests on the character of God himself, on his faithfulness that has never failed, on his love that has never wavered, on his wisdom that has never made a mistake, on his power that has never been diminished by the size or the complexity of what his children bring to him. And all of that, every bit of that unshakable foundation, is underneath you right now as you rest. You are not floating in uncertainty tonight, even if uncertainty is still present in your life. You are resting on something solid, something that was there before your fears arrived and will remain long after they have passed. And perhaps that is the last conscious thought your heart needs to hold before sleep takes you completely. That you are not resting on your own strength tonight. You are resting on His. And His has never once given way beneath the weight of a beloved child who needed somewhere safe to rest. And as you rest on that unshakable foundation tonight, as the last traces of conscious striving begin to dissolve into something quieter and more surrendered than you have felt in a very long time, maybe the images that drift through your mind now are gentle ones, peaceful ones, the kind that come when a soul has finally stopped fighting the stillness and started receiving it instead. Maybe you can imagine, just for a moment, a place that feels completely safe to you. Not a perfect place necessarily, not somewhere exotic or complicated to picture, just somewhere that carries the feeling of peace. Maybe it is somewhere from your childhood that you have not thought about in years, a porch, a garden, a quiet room that smelled like something warm and familiar and good. Maybe it is somewhere in nature, the edge of a lake at early morning when the water is perfectly still and the light is just beginning to find its way across the surface of everything. Maybe it is simply the feeling of being somewhere unhurried, somewhere where nothing is required of you, somewhere where time has slowed down enough that you can actually feel yourself existing within it rather than racing ahead of it, trying to manage what comes next. And in that place, whatever it looks like for you, there is a presence, not loud, not demanding, not requiring anything from you in this moment, just present. The way a trusted companion is present when they sit beside you in silence, and the silence itself becomes a kind of conversation. The way a loving parent is present when they sit at the edge of a sleeping child's bed and simply watch over them without needing the child to perform or respond or even be aware that they are there. That presence is God, and it is not imaginary. It is not something you are manufacturing through a mental exercise to help yourself relax. It is as real as anything you have ever experienced, more real in fact, because it exists independent of your ability to feel it clearly in any given moment. He is actually here, in this room, in this quiet, in this exact moment of your exhaustion and your releasing and your slow drift toward the rest your body and soul have both been needing for longer than you have probably admitted. And as sleep continues to draw you gently downward into its soft and restoring depths, you do not need to hold on to any particular thought or any particular feeling to remain in His presence. You cannot drift so far into sleep that His presence does not follow. You cannot sink so deep into rest that His watchfulness does not remain completely intact over every detail of your life and everyone in it that you love. He goes with you into sleep the way He has gone with you into every other place you have ever been. Quietly, faithfully, without fanfare and without condition. Simply because you are His and He has never once failed to be present with what belongs to Him. So let your eyes be heavy now. Let your thoughts be loose and unhurried and gentle. Let the images that come be soft ones, peaceful ones, the kind that carry you further into rest rather than pulling you back toward wakefulness. And know, in whatever part of your awareness is still receiving these words, that you are not alone in this drifting. You are accompanied. You are watched over. You are held in a love so vast and so faithful and so completely personal that it reaches all the way into the quiet depths of your sleeping and remains there, steady and sure and completely undiminished, through every hour between now and morning. And so here you are, at the end of this journey through the quiet hours of this night. Having traveled from the weight of everything you carried when you first lay down, through the gentle releasing of burden after burden, through the slow softening of a guarded heart, through the gradual surrender of a tired soul that finally remembered it was never designed to carry the world alone. And something is different now than it was when this night began. Not everything, perhaps. Not the circumstances that were present when you closed your eyes. Not the unanswered prayers that were resting on your heart when you first lay down. Not the people you love and worry about whose names have been quietly present throughout every moment of this evening. Those things are still there, still real, still carried in the faithful hands of a God who has not slept or shifted or looked away from a single detail of your life throughout the entire length of this night. But something inside you is different. Something in the interior landscape of your heart has shifted in the way that quiet things shift, slowly and without announcement. The way seasons change not in a single dramatic moment, but through the gradual accumulation of small and gentle turnings. You are softer than you were. You are lighter than you were. You are, perhaps for the first time and longer than you can easily remember, genuinely at rest. Not just physically, but in that deeper place where the real weariness lives, the place that sleep alone could never fully reach, the place that only His presence can touch and restore and make new again. And as morning eventually finds its way toward you, as the night slowly prepares to give way to another day with all of its responsibilities and its uncertainties and its fresh opportunities to trust and to love and to keep believing through whatever comes, you will not face it alone. You never have. You never will. The same God who watched over you through every hour of this night will be present in the first breath of morning. The same grace that covered you in the darkness will meet you in the light. The same love that held you while you slept will walk with you through every moment of the day ahead, as faithful and as near and as completely sufficient as it has been through every season of your life that brought you to this particular night. And maybe tomorrow, when the noise returns and the demands come back and the weight begins to accumulate again the way it always does, maybe you will remember this feeling of being held, this quiet certainty that you are not alone, this simple but revolutionary truth that the God of the universe knows your name and loves your soul and has never once stopped watching over everything that concerns you. And maybe remembering will make the releasing a little easier next time. Maybe trust will come a little sooner. Maybe the wall around your heart will take a little less time to soften. Because this is not a one-night journey. This is a lifelong learning. This beautiful and difficult and deeply rewarding practice of bringing your burdens to Jesus and leaving them in His hands instead of taking them back before morning comes. And every night that you return to this place of surrender, every night that you choose rest over striving and trust over control and grace over performance, you are growing, quietly and without fanfare, in the deepest and most lasting kind of way. So sleep now, dear friend. Sleep deeply and without guilt and without fear. Let His peace be the last thing your heart holds before consciousness fades completely. And when you wake, wake knowing that His mercies are genuinely new every morning, that His faithfulness is as fresh as the first light coming through your window, and that the God who carried you through this night is already present and already faithful in everything the new day holds. If this story brought rest to your heart tonight, please subscribe so that more nights like this one are always waiting for you whenever you need them. Share this with someone you love who is carrying too much and needs to be reminded that they don't have to carry it alone. And leave a comment below telling us how you are feeling. because your presence here matters, your faith matters, and you matter more than these words can fully say. Good night, dear friend. May Jesus himself give you the deepest, most healing, most genuinely peaceful sleep you have had in a very long time. And may you wake tomorrow held, restored, and reminded once again of just how deeply and how faithfully and how completely you are loved. Amen.